Hi there, this is Michelle from Toolfarm, and welcome to episode 5 of Michelle Learns Cinema 4D. Today we're going to focus on how to create sand dunes, but before that I just want to revisit something from the last episode. Episode 4, I talked about bringing in vector elements from Adobe Illustrator, and the method that I showed involved saving an Illustrator 8 file and then importing that into Cinema 4D. However, a YouTube user has informed me that there is a better way, the CV-ArtSmart plugin from Cineversity. It makes bringing in elements from Illustrator a breeze. Rick Barrett of Maxon has a great tutorial to go along with it. It's really easy to follow. I was up and running with it in just a few minutes. I'm going to be using this method from now on as opposed to the method I showed in the last video. This is why it's called Michelle Learns Cinema 4D, right? I live in Michigan, and a few weeks ago we were at Sleeping Bear Dunes, which is on Lake Michigan. And if you've ever seen the sand dunes here, the sand just goes on and on forever. We were in a designated climbing area. Most of the dunes are not for climbing. They want to keep them from eroding, so they have grass growing on them, and they're a very delicate ecosystem. And while we were there, I was noticing some of the characteristics of the dunes. You have these rolling sand hills, and you have these little divots from footprints. Rain, we were there on kind of a rainy, misty day. You also have these splotches of dune grass that grow all over it. Today I'm going to show you how I created these sand dunes and added the dune grass. And I want to give a shout out to Chris Schmidt at Grayscale Gorilla. I followed his grass tutorial. It's not at all like the grass that I created. His grass was, like lawn, but it really helped a lot in figuring this all out. So without further ado, let's get started. There are several different ways you can create the land objects. I'm going to use the landscape object, so I'm going to go under the cube here and choose landscape. And it's pretty good as it is, actually. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. I'll set the size to 1200. And I'm going to leave the y-axis set to 100. That's fine for now. A few things I want to change. The rough furrows, I'll set that to 10. Fine furrows, I'm going to leave alone for the moment. Scale, I'll set that to 2. I'll give it a little bit more depth there. And before we get too far along here, I may want to tweak this later, but I want to add the texture. So I'm going to create a new material, and this will be the sand. I'll rename it sand. I'm going to drag this right on my dune, which will be the dune soon. So I'm going to double click sand. A cool trick I learned from Chris Schmidt of Grayscale Gorilla is how to access the Apple System Color Picker and use it in Cinema 4D. Go under Cinema 4D Preferences, and then it's under Units. Make sure that you have this Use System Color Picker checked. I'm going to open an image here so that I can pull samples from it. I'll just grab brown for now. It's kind of dark, but we'll call it good. And I want to add some texture to this. I'm going to go under Texture and choose Noise. And I'll click the noise. Now here's where the color picker really comes in nice. I'm going to be picking 2 colors. First I'll choose a darker shade, and then I will choose a lighter shade. Not too light. I don't want it to go totally white. That's pretty good right there. If I render this, it's way too large of grain. I want to scale it down quite a bit. I'm going to set global scale to 10, and relative scale I'm also going to set to 10 for the X. For the Y position I'm going to set that to 600 and leave Z as it is. Now when I render it, you'll see what that looks like. It's a bit better. It looks very sandy. I'm going to be adding some bump to that as well, so that will help it look a lot nicer. To add that, I'm going to go under bump, turn that on by checking the box. So I'm going to do the same thing, go under Texture, Noise. I'm going to leave the colors black and white because this is a bump map. So I'm going to set the noise to VL Noise. Gives a little bit of swirliness like you see in the footprints in the sand. I'm going to scale it up though a bit. I don't want it too small. Let's just have a look at that really quick. I want to render it. Command R on Mac will render that for me. That's not bad. It might be a bit too much. We'll have to adjust the contrast. I'm going to bring this up a bit and then lower the mix. That's pretty obnoxious, but if I go back under bump, I can lower the strength quite a bit. We'll set it to maybe 6. Let's see what that looks like. It gives some nice subtle texture, but I still have some shadow. Maybe it's a bit too much. I could probably tone it down just a little bit. I'm going to go back under noise and turn down the contrast a touch. That's probably a little bit better. Actually, I want to make it a little bit more noticeable. You can see there's quite a lot of footprints here. Now the sand's quite a bit darker that I'm making than this sand in the actual photo. Once I add sky and all that, it's going to lighten up, and I know this because I've gone through this a few times. Okay, enough of the sand. Let's add some grass. Now I want to make sure that I select landscape. To add grass, I go under simulate, hair object, add hair. So it's all over now. If I just hit render, you can take a look at what it looks like. It's kind of spiky brown. It almost looks like a porcupine or something like that. The first thing I want to do is adjust how many segments that I have here. I have way too many segments. I need much more sparse grass. So I'm going to select hair and go under hairs down here in the attributes. We're going to set the count to about 1,000 for now, and we'll see what that looks like. I'm going to render this. It will render more slowly. The hair simulation does take quite a bit of juice here. Now I'm going to change the color of the grass. Now the beach grass is pretty brown, and maybe that's okay. There are some green ones as well. So I'd like to really do a mix of it. So let me first select my hair, and I'll double click the hair material, and that brings up the material editor. And the brown actually may be pretty good, but I want to go more for a nice spring green. So let me bring up that image again so I can sample colors. Double click here, and then going for a dark green. This might not be totally accurate because what I'm selecting is more of like scrubby stuff on the beach and not so much grass. Let me grab something a little bit more front here. That's probably pretty good. Actually, that looks very close to what I have. Let me make a little bit more variation there. I'll just lighten that up and take down the saturation a bit. So now when I render it, you can see that it looks a little bit green. It's still very spiky and fake looking. It kind of looks like plastic grass. There are a lot of things that you can do with this grass editor. Look at the materials editor. You have all of these options that you don't normally have if you just create your own material. So we'll be playing with a couple of those. I'm going to go to specular and turn down the strength just a little bit. And adjust the sharpness. I can adjust the color here. I just want to show you the difference. I'm going to render this now with white. You see we have these white bits of grass growing. Let's make these more green. Maybe that's too dark. We'll go a little lighter. And now when I render, they're green highlights. So that looks a little bit more natural. So I want to adjust the length. It's a bit too short for what I want. I want to have taller beach grass. To do that, I'm going to click on hair and then go down to guides. And here's where I can change the length. It says 100 now. I want to set that to 200. And I'll just render that, and you can see how much longer the grass now appears to be. Pretty darn crazy long grass. But it's very straight and it looks really fake still. So let's give it a little bit more of an organic look. To do that, I'm going to go under the hair material again and click frizz and turn on frizz. Now just by turning it on, it adds some nice movement, so it's not so straight up. It kind of gives it some bend, and this is actually probably pretty good as it is. I can make some adjustments if I want to. In Chris Schmidt's tutorial, he did quite a lot of adjusting to the frizz settings, but for this type of grass, I think we're good to go here. I want it to be more patchy. So to do that, close out the material editor, go back to hair, and go under hairs. Now the area for this is under growth, and it's under density. Chris Schmidt had a nice example of using a gradient and having it right in the center, and then he did a few other things for it. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to go under noise again. I'm going to set the noise to Paxo. I don't know what most of these mean, but I've just gone through them and I liked how this one is very black and white. But I do want to scale it up a bit. I'll scale it up to about 500. And I'm going to also set the relative scale to 500 on the X and Y axis. Let me just boost the contrast a bit so that I have more of a differentiation between the black and white. So I'll drag that up a bit. And I'd like to just kind of just click through the seed to see if I can get a different layout. Something that I like there. That's probably pretty good. I'm going to boost the contrast a bit more, and maybe I'd like to have it so that I have specific black and white areas. Maybe that's pretty good. I'm going to hit render there. So you can see now that I have little bunches of grass. And actually I kind of like this. It's still looking a little bit fake, and I'd like to have more brown in there. There's a few things I can do to give it a more natural look. I'm going to go under bend, which is one of the other options in the materials editor. So I'll check bend, and I want to bend that quite a bit more. I'm going to set that to 90, set the variation to about 20, but I'm going to lower the amount. And instead of the direction being random, I'm going to set this to world and up the variation amount a bit more. 29, how about 29? And set the axis, instead of X, Y, or Z, I'm going to set this to texture. And let's just add noise again to that. I'm just going to pick one here. Let's see what that looks like. Now you can see I've got these long grasses that are bending down. Another thing I can do is to give it more variation in length. These are very similar lengthed pieces of grass. So I'm going to go under scale and check the scale box here. And I can set the variation to, I don't know, 70. And let's add some noise again here under texture. It seems like a very easy way to get quite a lot of variety. And I want to make sure that I have a lot of contrast again. And boost the contrast here. That's probably pretty good. And I'll maybe scale it up a bit. Scale it up, not down. Let's just have a look at that and see what that does. Oh yeah, that's nice. There's lots of variety there. So I want to add some sky to this, and one of the easiest ways to add a sky is to use the physical sky setting. So I'm going to select physical sky. So the first thing I want to do is set up the time. Now they don't have northern Michigan on here, so we'll just use the closest. North America, USA, Detroit is probably the closest on here, or Chicago. We'll do Chicago. And this is set up for noon, so this uses military time or European time, so I'm going to set this to about 1930. That would be 7:30 at night. Maybe that's a bit too late. And we don't really have anything in the sky yet anyway to look at. I don't like the specular on the sand, but maybe we'll change that. Under basic, I can add a few things. The sun, sky, I can add atmosphere, clouds. I can also add volumetric clouds, sky objects, that kind of thing. And let's just take a look here. Let me rotate the image up. You can see the sky there. So we'll do it at an angle. It's a very low angle like that. It's hard to see with all this grass going on here. It does actually kind of look like the lake out there. One thing that I found was really interesting is that there's presets loaded in here. So if I go to click load sky preset, I can find one that I really like. So something that's sort of sunset-y looking, but not too bright. Let's see how this is. So there you go. This is how the Sleeping Bear dunes can be rendered in Cinema 4D. And again, I'm still learning. It took a while for me to get this far, but it's been a lot of fun. I gotta say, it's getting easier and easier. Anyway, this is Michelle from Toolfarm. Thanks for watching.